Welcome to the Adapt or Die podcast. This podcast explores ideas related to self-growth, finding meaning, and living a more fulfilled lifestyle. It's your host, with the most, Armel Tala.
And it's your host, on the low, Ben Smith. We're two college students on our own path of lifelong learning with the hope that you will join us in our journey. And now, it's time for the next episode of
The Adapt or Die podcast. Welcome back. I know we just finished a long series.
Very long.
Very, very long. Not just in the fact that it was 3 episodes, almost a whole month worth of Bitcoin, but it was an hour each time, which...
It's almost too much Bitcoin for me.
A little too much. It's never enough.
I was going to say, it's never enough for Mel.
It's never enough. It was so pleasant, right? That same day, I just bought a book. It was called The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. And the only reason why I trigger bought it is because usually me and Book now spend our times. We're like, bro, I had so much fun just looking at these books and adding to my cart, and we don't buy them. We just enjoy just adding books to the cart, right? And then so I see the book and I'm like, okay, another Bitcoin book. And I see it says Forward by Michael Saylor, instant bot. Like, I kid you not, just buy now. Like,
1 day shipping, extra money for the 1 day shipping.
Got here in 1 day. I'm almost done with the book. Short book. It was an article originally.
It was good though.
It was really good. But last 3 weeks were mine. But now it's time for Benjamin to talk about Benjamin. And what do I mean by this, Ben? Wait,
guys.
Sorry. No, I messed it up. It could have been a 3-way Benjamin. Pause. Now it's time for Benjamin to talk about Benjamin. What does this mean, Benjamin? Sorry, I just had to do that.
Hey guys, today we're talking about Benjamin Franklin, my namesake. Not actually. Also, I thought I'd let you know, I didn't think about this before, but when I was editing, I realized that we put the names of the episodes in the title, so whenever we're like pretending that no one knows what the episode's about, like they definitely know the whole time, and I didn't even think about that.
That's true.
So just for future reference, yeah.
I'm gonna keep it up though. I'm gonna act like you're gonna be like,
I think
oh my
it's
god.
funny. Yeah. Y'all can just don't look at the title, okay? And then
just don't.
Anyways,
but the book is the Autobiography
of Benjamin Franklin by Benjamin Franklin,
which is it's interesting. I think okay, full disclosure. The reason why Benjamin will be talking about Benjamin is because Armel did not read anything about Benjamin. I'll be honest. Bitcoin was taking up my day. But I think it's so interesting that you get to look into like the actual past. Like,
yeah, like he wrote it. That's crazy.
It can't be any more true. Like,
yeah, like it's his words. That's so cool.
I don't know if you know any of like his accomplishments off the top of your head, but can you tell me like what makes Benjamin Franklin, like why should we care to read about Benjamin Franklin?
He was one of the most successful people really in his time, but definitely in America. He was a polymath, meaning he's very well read and understood. Like, he understood a lot of things in many different areas of like many different disciplines. He discovered lightning was electricity. Like,
that's crazy.
We think of him as a politician. He did the Louisiana Purchase, which wasn't even in the book actually. He in his town, not where he's from, but where he lived, he helped make firefighter. Like, he created a system for firefighters. He created a hospital. He created education. He created all these things, like all these public service things that you think of. Like, he basically started them, not himself, but he was the person who started them, right? And he did all these things. He was a general at one point. He was given 2 degrees. He just done so many things.
Do you know what those degrees are in?
Okay, so I will say that the degrees were given to him by, I think it was Yale and Cambridge. Maybe.
Not surprised.
But they were honorary degrees based on his works that he did in the scientific and philosophical fields, I believe.
Yeah.
It could be wrong. It could be just science. But he's given 2 different degrees. He did not actually go get the degrees. I'll be clear on that. But they were given to him because he had done so much for certain fields. I don't remember the specifics though.
But for people that don't understand how, like, I guess you can't call him a doctor because he didn't get those degrees. I think that's like a fine line that you maybe don't want to cross. But to get an honorary degree, it's difficult.
Yeah, like it would be
Like,
the equivalent of Harvard being like, dang Ben or dang Mel, you really did so much stuff in the world of computer science that you didn't get a computer science degree, but we'll give you one. Like
Yeah.
that's what?
Like,
That's insane.
It's a true honor. So I think that you guys get it. You guys know
Yeah,
Benjamin
and that's just
Franklin.
off the top of my head. I'm sure he's done even more. And the book really it ended before he even got to like the Constitution or anything like that. So all of that stuff, I actually don't. Not that I don't know about it. Of course, we learn about it in school, but it wasn't in the book at least. So
That's crazy. But I think people are wondering, like, why should we care about this Benjamin Franklin book? Like, what am I going to get from this Benjamin Franklin book? Like, what lessons does he share in his book?
yeah, he goes over a few really like important things I think that are relevant to everyone in terms of influencing others. Some key traits that he talks about for character and habits, and then he talks about happiness as well. And all of those things are very enlightening to hear from someone who's so successful and has done so much and also lived a very full life as well. He wasn't someone who just worked all the time. That's what we'll talk about later, but we'll talk about more of that later.
Okay.
But let's start with how he influenced and like went about talking with others, because I think this was interesting. Just because we touched on it in How to Win Friends and Influence People, and that's that he never uses absolute words in the sense like the words he uses are never assure his opinion to be absolute. So he never uses certainly or undoubtedly or positively or things like that. He always uses words that like, I think so, or something like that.
Why is it like, why would it be bad for me to walk in a room and be like, I'm 100% certain I'm the best looking dude in this room, right? Or why would it be bad for someone to use, I guess, have a lot of certainty in their saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of the coin. So if you're right in what you're saying, what you're probably going to do is make the other person jealous or other people jealous. They're just going to be annoyed that you think you're better than everyone. Even if you're somehow better in some certain aspect, they'll be like, why is he flaunting this? Like, why is he doing this? And you're just going to alienate people, right?
Yeah.
But then if you're wrong, then of course it's like you're discredited and people are just annoyed by the fact that you're saying these things anyways. And you're trying to prove a point that you probably don't even know, but you don't even know what you're talking about, which is even worse, right? But so whenever you're very certain in what you're saying, you're really just alienating others. And also, there's no way that you can know everything, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the idea that you know, like have some perfect knowledge is impossible. And so being certain in everything you're saying is just, it's a fool's errand, okay? Because you're always going to be wrong about something.
That's interesting. And I think it's like one of those things too where no one, even if you're super certain, and this is from Influence Friends, people are not going to want to accept it even if you're 100% right, especially in that argument, right? So I think it's interesting. Like, to me, it's like Dale Carnegie studied Benjamin Franklin.
No, he did. Like, he pulled from his autobiography. Yeah.
My memory's very weak.
There's actually a quote in the book that he pulled directly from the autobiography, I think, which was interesting. I saw it and I was like, yo, that's crazy. But it made sense because, I mean, he's a successful man.
Did it hit you more like when you were reading it, when you read it from How to Influence Friends, like Dale Carnegie's book, to compare to like when you were reading off the autobiography? Like, which one really hit you more?
It was definitely Benjamin Franklin, just because he had done so much in the world of like politics and helping others, and he had done so much for public service, and he had used his powers of persuasion so well that when he said that this was a rule that he never broke really, and that was he attributed him not being so absolute in his saying as being a huge reason of why he was so persuasive. And when he said that, I was like, dang, he's done insane things for his time and for America and whatever. And so it's crazy that he says that. Like, I should take that to heart. Because when Dale Carnegie says it, it's like, okay, it hits me and the examples make sense. But when you hear someone who's said that from their own anecdotal experience and used it throughout their whole life to create such a lively and ambitious career, it's like, how could you not let that hit you, if that makes sense?
No,
like, how could that not hit you?
It's the difference between hearing your mom say, like, oh, dad told you to do this or he's going to beat your butt, and then dad really telling you, I'm going to beat your butt. So it's kind of like that difference. But what's the second takeaway in terms of influencing others?
The second takeaway was, we kind of touched on it already, but just not like don't have fights and don't dispute others and don't contradict people, especially if you don't need to. There's really no reason. We talked about this in How to Win Friends and Influence People, so we'll kind of like move through this pretty quickly. But just don't make it a point to be agreeable with others. I mean, if you need to criticize someone, don't criticize them in a way that is like condescending or that that makes them feel a certain way, right? You just want to, your goal in criticizing them is to help them see their error and then hopefully correct it for the benefit of both of you, right? So
I like the way you phrase that. Help them. It's to help them correct their error. I think if you just look at it that way, it just kind of changes the way you approach that criticism.
And you would want that also, hopefully, so that way they'll correct your error in a kind manner as well in the future, which would be helpful because you want to be able to be corrected and have good feedback yourself to be better tomorrow than you are today. So,
and then for the third, and I think this one ties into we made a joke about this when we were reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. It was was this related to give someone a fine reputation to live up to, or is it?
This one was more of, so what he would do is he would propose certain public service things to the city, and so he'd be like, all right guys, I think it'd be really beneficial if we started a library. Who would like to start a library? But instead of saying it was my idea and like this is how we should do it, what he would say is, I had a few people approach me and they all thought it would be a really great idea to start a library, and I'm just like the middleman, or because he owned a newspaper and he printed he was a printer at one point, and so he was a very good spokesperson, and so he'd be like, I'm just the spokesperson, even though it would be his idea, for these ideas and for these things that other people wanted. And because he detached the idea from his personal reputation, I guess, he thinks that they were much more receptive among his peers. So
it ties in with the idea of giving someone a fine reputation to live up to.
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
Because it's when you feel like everyone or you get introduced an idea and they present it in a way like, we are going to do this, it makes you want to be more involved and get, the support from everybody else. So he's ahead of his time, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah, he really was.
Like, he should have wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't know why he was waiting too long to do this. But So I know in the book they talked about him having these 13 virtues that were really like solid. I don't know if this relates to this part of it. I think so. It does.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
What were some of these virtues and characters? Because from what I know, he wasn't always the most likable person. What character traits did he decide to instill in himself that made him the man he is that we know?
Yeah, I mean, off the dome, I can't remember the exact traits, but the ones that kind of stick out to me, the first one he actually mentioned, and he put them in order on purpose, was actually temperance, which was interesting to me. It kind of hit me because I was like, and for temperance just means sobriety, or like not drinking alcohol, basically. Yeah. And that was interesting to me because I was like, dang, I'm 19. Does that apply to me or not? Like, I don't, you know what I mean? I mean, I don't drink right, but
we're underage drinking is not good.
Right.
Especially if you're in college. Look at me.
Yes, sir.
All right. We can move on.
But it was interesting that he said that, and he said it for, I guess, a variety of reasons. I mean, it was for productivity. Obviously, when you drink or do other drugs or whatever people do, you lose productivity because you feel bad in the morning and whatnot. And then also this idea of indulgence, I guess, the idea that you're not drinking to get buzzed, or you're drinking to get drunk, right?
Yeah.
And that's like a different type of drinking in and of itself. But it's almost like it's like you're fulfilling your desire like to the max. But like the more you do that, the more you have a hard time controlling your desires. And so then even though you might have lost like time or productivity, well, you do, but you actually lose more in the end, just due to your self-discipline. Your self-discipline is actually decreasing, at least in my opinion, because you're feeding your desire. It's kind of like if you expect to get full at every single meal on like your favorite meal. It's like you get disappointed on other things, then you don't really like doing the hard things in life, right? Yeah. It's like that idea. Like you lose your ability to do the uncomfortable things, if that makes sense.
That's a really interesting... I mean, to hear when someone's like, don't drink, it's like obvious, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny how his perception isn't just isn't just like, oh, I'm going like, it's like it's bad for you physically. He's just like, it's taking away from things that you don't even realize that it's taking away from.
And I don't want to put words in his mouth either, because he didn't say those words specifically. He kind of, that's kind of my analysis of how it felt that he viewed drinking. So I don't want to say that he said those words, but that was also like, he was to be like, he did say without a doubt that drinking is not something that he really did. Like he did not condone drinking like that at all. So
for some of y'all out there, look, you're just gonna have to come to terms with the fact that drinking may not always be the best thing.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
That's how life is. And also, if you want to see his 13 virtues, I'm sure you could search up his 13 virtues real quick. He struggled a lot with, specifically with being right, and he had people tell him that he had a hard time accepting being wrong, and he had a hard time. He was told that he was condescending a lot, and that he a smart ass basically, and that he really tried to correct that aspect of him. But I guess one thing that I also want to talk about is he actually opens the book, or I mean, he didn't write this part knowing it would be the opening, so I don't know if he opened it right. But he can basically starts off with how he thinks vanity is a really good attribute. I don't say amazing; it's not the best.
Can you define what vanity is for the people that don't know? And I'm one of them.
I mean, honestly, I don't know the exact definition, but vanity is basically kind of a higher view of yourself. You can think of almost as someone who, like my go-to like image in my head is like someone in the gym, like just like flexing and looking in the mirror and like being like almost like self-praise, if that makes sense. It's like a really high view of yourself. What does Google say?
Google says inflated pride in oneself or one's appearance, conceit, something that is vain, empty, and valueless. And then the rest of these definitions are related to furniture.
And so what he gets at here, though, was really interesting in the sense that he valued vanity and that like self-value or that self-confidence, because he thought, it seemed at least, that you needed to believe in yourself to be effective in the world, where it's like if you didn't think you were effective, then you couldn't be effective. Or if you didn't think highly of yourself, then no one else would think highly of you as well, right? Yeah. So you kind of need to be there. But at the same token, he made it a point not to be conceited, which was kind of like the flip side of vanity, in the sense that people don't like it when you are so hung up on yourself that you don't see what's going on around you and be aware of others and have care and really value others as well. So it's like you kind of have to be strong in your pride, but then he really made it a point to mask that pride in a lot of kindness and I don't know what the exact word is, but he made it a point not to prop himself up in front of others, but he had a very strong view of himself, and he was very clear about that.
Which is it's I think it plays to the idea of confidence, right? So there's a difference between confidence and ego. There's a difference between those that understand and are comfortable in what they can do, and those that have to brag or like have to hype themselves up to make it seem even bigger. And I think in offline, like I had to use offline because I've heard so many people on podcasts say it, and it just means like when we aren't recording. But offline, you made a really good analogy, and I want you to explain that about courage and confidence.
Yeah. So the analogy Mel and I had discussed was that humility isn't not believing in yourself, right? Humility is similar to courage in the sense that courage is not a lack of fear, it's overcoming fear, right? In the same way, humility is not a lack of pride, it is overcoming that pride. It is, you still have the pride, but you are not, in the sense that you're not, like the analogy doesn't perfectly line up, but you get what I'm saying, right? Yeah. In the sense that humility isn't a lack of pride. That's the point. Humility you have pride, but you're just not flaunting it, if that makes sense. You're not being conceited. And I guess vain is the overdose of self-confidence, if you will. And you want to keep that overdose to a minimum while still having self-confidence.
I think that's like such a good analogy, because I think a lot of times people think like, oh, I have to be humble so I can't, take pride in what I do. I can't, because sometimes you got to boost yourself up
Yeah.
in that way. Like if you don't ever, reward yourself, or you don't ever get recognition for it, then like you lose that motivation. It's then very easy for you to start self-doubting. But it's like you have to walk that very fine line between knowing what you can do and not telling everybody what you can do, I guess, in a way. But I think what was really interesting that you brought up was how he viewed like making progress. And we've talked about this, but coming from Benjamin Franklin, the GOAT, how does he frame this idea?
Yeah, he says this quote, and if it goes over your head, it's kind of a weird like frame. Like he says it kind of strange, but I'll say it slowly. He says, "It is true that if you can clamber and get to the top of a staircase without using the steps, you will more easily gain them in descending. But certainly, if you begin with the lowest, you'll more easily ascend to the top."
Now, for the people that don't have a PhD in 1722 English, can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I got you. I mean, basically all he's saying is that, yeah, of course, if you try to jump to the top of the stairs as fast as you possibly can with all your might, the rest of the stairs will come easily compared to the top one, right? But how much easier would it be for you to get to the top of the stairs if you just climb them one at a time in ascending order? That's really all he said in some fancy language for no reason.
And this ties in with a book that we're going to read soon, Atomic Habits, and it's building small, like working on those small habits, because it's easier stepping stone. Or if you're wanting to learn a specific thing, like I want to learn how to play the guitar, well, you're going to have to first learn how to like hold the guitar right? You can't just go straight into trying to read the music and instantly you're going to become good at it. Like, sure, after a while, if you just keep stringing strings until something sounds right, you may get it, but it's going to be a lot harder than if you take the proper steps. Learn how to hold it first. Learn what each string plays and how to actually, I have no clue how to play the guitar. I don't know why I use this analogy because it's falling apart as I speak, but you guys get what I'm saying.
And one point I would like to say before we move on is just that he made the really good point that oftentimes when you try to climb to the top of the stairs as fast as possible, you'll end up falling a lot, and instead of actually making it there eventually, you just quit, right? So yeah, if you make it, it might be easier. Like all the middle steps might be easier for you, but you might not make it.
Yeah.
And so it's even if you do make it, it's still mentally tough to do that, and mentally exerting more energy probably for no reason as well. So it's like a waste of all this mental energy when you could just incrementally help yourself out, and then you'll get there eventually. So
that's a great point. Just last tie in on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think to me that ties into the get rich quick idea, where people are like, I just want to make a lot of money overnight. We talked about crypto, so I'll tie it in there. But it's this whole idea, a lot of people have in crypto, it's like, oh, if I buy this random coin, this random token, I'm going to just instantly make a lot of money and then I'll be done. I don't have to work. When there's a difference of if you think, okay, I'm going to actually, start a business to do this and I'm going to learn all these different skills, because let's say you do make a whole bunch of money from just one speculative investment. You don't know how to actually make the money. You just guessed and you were right.
you just got lucky.
So when that money, people that usually make a lot of money really fast, they don't have the habits to control it and they blow through the money. So what are you going to do after you don't, you run out of that money? No one's going to hire you because you were a millionaire. But if you work your way up, build a business, you sell that business, and even if you blow all the money or something bad happens, you can rebuild it because you have those skills. So I think that's
that's a really great point.
Thank you, man.
One thing I do want to jump to is I think you have some words to say about this, but he says this later in the book. This is me quoting him. He says, "I had secured leisure during the rest of my life for philosophical studies and amusements." And he said this right after a decent blurb on how hard he'd worked as a younger man and how much work and time he'd put in and a word he always uses, industry or industrious. He says, I was industrious. I like that word. Now I like it more. But we always kind of talk about how, like, yes, you want to have balance in your life, but maybe balance, the best balance for your whole life is actually imbalance, in the sense of you need to focus when you're younger to bear the fruits of your labor once you're older. And what do you think about that?
And definitely this was an interesting idea to me, because I'm one of those that coming from my parents, I just believe in like working like your tail off. Like, to me, the idea that I'm going to come out of school and just be like, oh, I got a job. I got this great job. And then I'm chilling. I'm just going to work the minimum hours and try to skate by. What you're doing when you look at your balance by in a short term, right? You're trading this short-term balance for long-term balance, right? And so when you're thinking short-term, you're like, okay, yes, I'm going to, just work my minimum hours or less than I can and then go enjoy myself, right? But again, giving up that long-term balance, meaning you're going to have to do this until you retire. This is the trap that people talk about 9 to 5s is people view the 9 to 5 like I'm only going to work that 9 to 5 and then I'm going to have to be forced to get to 60 something. You can work that 9 to 5. Look at balance from a long-term point of view, meaning you front load in your youth when you're 20, 30, you have all this energy. And a lot of older people will say this, like, I really wish when I was in my 20s or was in my 30s, like I really just dove more into it, was better about my investments and saving. Because once you do that, what you're doing is, sure, you gave up 1 to 2 decades, 10 to 20 years of your life just really working, which doesn't mean you can't have fun. It just means like you just really focus on your future, that now you get to spend your 40s, 50s, 60s, 80s, instead of you having to work this 9 to 5 that you don't like, putting in bare minimum effort. Because when you're not putting your full into something, it's very hard for you to feel fulfilled in that. And so when you look at it like, while I'm young, while I'm in my 20s, 30s, or whatever time frame, you say, I'm going to do, sure, you can do a 9 to 5, and then you work on something on the side that really fulfills you, meaning you're busting your butt in 2 things. Or you just go really hard. Maybe you work at a company you really love, and you decide, like, I'm going to put in 50, 60 hours at this company. You do that for however many years you believe will be enough for you to reach your goal, this financial freedom. Then you truly have freedom for the rest of your life, compared to having to work from your 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s. The next thing you know, you're like, oh, I didn't save any money because I've just been enjoying my life in this short-term balance. So that's just my 2 cents. But I mean,
yeah. And another way to frame this, your time earlier in life is worth more in the same way that your money is worth earlier in your investing career, if that makes sense. So this idea that you've probably heard this, if you invest in an IRA, right, or just put money in the stocks when you're 18 or 19 and have it compound. You hear these crazy numbers, like by the time you're 65, you'll be, you'll have 10 million or whatever. Yeah, like something crazy. But the idea of compound interest doesn't just hold for money; it holds for literally you as well, right? And so, as you're learning and you're growing and you're becoming who you are, if you are putting in twice as much work when you're 18 or 19, that's going to compound to the extent that once you're 30 or 40, that time put in will produce 10x, 100x more than it would produce if you had put that same amount of time in at 45 or 50, which actually creates more leisure time over the course of your life than it would have if you had taken that when you're 20 or. So there's another way to frame it as just your time now is worth a lot more. So the more you do now, the more it's going to compound in the future, and that gives you an easier track as well, and you're going to get more time back. So return on investment's much greater.
And I am a strong believer in looking at everything almost from a financial lens, which people will say, what does, learning finance and stuff do for you besides, one, having your money in check, which is the biggest thing, but it also gives you a different perspective. So, but this isn't about finance. This is about Benjamin Franklin. So when it comes to happiness, he has a couple, I guess you have a couple takeaways about that. Yeah. And I think this is a great way to kind of come to a close of this episode.
Yeah, the first one is, he says, human felicity, which is another word for happiness, is produced not so much by great pieces of good fortune that seldom happen, as by little advantages that occur every day. And so what this...
I'm reading that like...
To break it down, what he said was, happiness is not created by great fortunes landing on you all at once, so the lottery. It's created by the little things that give us joy every single day. And so... this really kind of hit me when you think about people who win the lottery, right? Like, you hear these stories, and this is so true. They almost, by a year later or so, they often go broke or end up in prison or depressed or dead or something like that, right? Yeah. Great fortunes, when you get something all at the same time, human tendency is just to squander it, really. That's Parkinson's law. Like, we talked about that before. Yeah. our version of Parkinson's
Can
law.
you explain what Parkinson's law is for people that don't know?
Yeah, I think the original version was work expands to fill time available, but the applicability to money is expenses expand to fill the funds available. So if you have a lot of money, you will have a lot of expenses just because you have the money to spend, right? But if you were to get money incrementally in like small parts, then you wouldn't spend as much because you don't have the money to spend, but you can spend it on things that really matter, and you get more value out of them because you think more about what you're spending. And so the little things are what matter, is what he says. And those things are often things that are free, in my opinion, just like the people you hang around with. He doesn't talk about this, but
Yeah.
the relationships you make, the habits you build, the experiences you have, the passions you pursue, things like that. It's like the little things that you choose now have a huge impact over the course of your life.
And I think the way people can look at this is that not everything good has to happen to you all at once. You know, it's like
And you really wouldn't want it to, right? But keep going.
There's like a process, kind of. It's some people sometimes fall so obsessed, like, why am I not this at this age? When it's like, why don't you just think I can be this if I follow this process, this journey, right? So again, the whole thing of, trust the process gets reiterated throughout time in so many different ways, but it's the same idea, just different words.
Right. The last thing I want to touch on, we're almost done. We're trying to keep these episodes. We're good on time. But he says, when men are employed, they are best contented. For on the days they worked, they were good-natured and cheerful. And with the consciousness of having done a good day's work, they spent the evening jollily. If you didn't catch that, because his words are, whatever, he basically just said that the men, this is when he was a general, he's talking about his soldiers. When the men were being put to work, they were happier, they had a good day. But when it was raining or they just couldn't work for whatever reason, they were all in terrible moods and they felt bad and they were sad and depressed and anxious and whatever. And so the application here is that you actually need to be working. You need to be doing something. When I say working, I don't mean making money necessarily, but doing something that you value, that makes an impact on the world, that's going to improve you or the lives of others around you, right? That is something that will give you happiness. We talked about this on a different podcast, happiness with your life.
Yeah.
The happiness of like, I'm glad with the person that I am, if that makes sense. So just things to think about. You need to be doing something with your days.
It is that struggle that I think people that retire have, where
absolutely.
They figure out they've been working their entire life, but then they realize, like, what do I do with all this free time I have, right? And so I just want to go back on like the balance thing, because this plays hand in hand with that. Because some people may argue, well, okay, you just brought up the point that when I quit working, what will I do? But it's not the idea that work is something you do for money, like you said, but work can be something you do to advance you towards mastery, towards something you are passionate about, towards a craft. So when we're talking about finding that, long-term balance, it's not that you're going to transition from this one job into not doing anything and just traveling and vacation, but you work a job that you may not like for a long time, or that you may even like.
Hopefully you like it.
And then you transition to actually doing things you are fully interested in. So maybe instead of you being an accountant, you go and then become a barista or something, or you work as a server, or you become a teacher at a school.
Exactly. And also the other thing is that once you make that transition, there's literally no pressure for you to have to make a certain amount of money or be a certain thing. Like, you've already done the hard part, if that makes sense. Like, hopefully by the time you're 30, you're not 30, well, middle age, 40 or 50, in my mind at least, you'll have completed, or done a large chunk of your goals or what you want to complete in life, right? And once you finish that, you should be financially free and whatnot, so you can really focus on what it is you truly want to do. Not that shouldn't be done in your career, but you can also kind of cut your day off whenever you want. If you just want to work on what you want to do for 6 hours a day and then go home and be with your grandchildren, like, you can do that and not feel like you're missing out or you're not providing for your family or things like that. So just things to think about as well.
And happiness is always a great way to end, because we hope you are in a good mood after listening to this much shorter episode. But what are the last takeaways you have before I give a quote?
I will say, this is cliche, but he was one of the hardest workers, and I can't really reiterate that enough in the sense that he was so industrious, in the sense that he was very diligent in his work and always being keen on doing that. He was a sincere. He really valued integrity and honesty and those character ethics and things like that as well. And so all the things we've talked about a lot, he really reinforced and embodied those in terms of habits, virtues, not valuing money too much, and really focusing on what he wanted to do for others. So that's what I have to say about Mr. Franklin. It was a great book. If you want to read it, you should. It is a bit of a harder read.
It's like reading a textbook.
It's older English, I will say, and there's a little bit of run-on sentences, there's many commas, but regardless, it was great knowledge and it was very interesting. So, Mel, take us away.
I just want to add,
quote.
Ben just threw shots at me. I will read the book, Ben. Okay, thank you.
I was not
I'm kidding. But so, your favorite part of the podcast: quotes from our Melicus Melius.
Beautiful way to start off.
And an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. Benjamin Franklin. The reason why I chose that quote, simply because we aren't just reading this autobiography because it's Benjamin Franklin, or we're just randomly reading it. There's so many lessons you can learn from other people. We try to, most of the time, read books that are directly trying to tell us something, but at the same time, there's so much knowledge in the life someone has lived. So I hope you guys really pulled a lot of good information from this. I learned a lot, Ben. Thank you so much for covering my butt in this episode. With all that being said, thank you guys for listening. Check out all the links in the description. Make sure you like, subscribe, tell your mom, tell your dad, tell your grandma, because we're going to be the best podcast out there.
Thanks. Oh, by the way, happy holidays, guys.
Oh.
I looked at the schedule. I think this comes out the 20th maybe, or the 13th of December.
Because right now we're about to go into the holidays, and you guys should be watching this going into Christmas holidays.
Yeah.
So happy holidays.
Happy holidays, guys.
Happy New Year's. Peace.